Taking those first steps towards self-employment might seem overwhelming at first, but it's actually simpler than you think. One successful method is to repurpose some of the professional skills you've already mastered into practical income opportunities. For example, consider the difference between knowing how to write and becoming a freelance writer. But more on that later. Today's presentation is a step-by-step process to identify the skills you love doing and figure out which could be monetizable. The first step is to list the W-2 jobs you've held. Then list the functional skills you've used in each one. As an example, let's say one of your jobs was Director of Operations. Some of the functional skills you might have developed were report writing, financial management, data analysis, project management, group facilitation, risk management, human resources, and technology strategy. Now we're going to review a tool you can use to reorganize these skills into your level of competency and level of interest so that we can highlight those skills which you may want to repurpose into self-employment. This tool is called Passiontivity. It's divided into 4 sections, which you'll label as follows: high motivation at the top, low motivation at the bottom, high skill on the right, and low skill on the left. The upper right quadrant is high engagement. These are the skills which you excel at and which you love doing. In other words, if you were independently wealthy, you'd still do them. The bottom right is stopgap work. These skills you're perfectly competent at, but they don't exactly get you out of bed Monday morning. The upper left quadrant is professional development. This quadrant breaks down into 2 sections: want to and should. The want tos are the get tos, the things you'd love to learn more about. The shoulds are the have tos, which are the skills that you think you should develop. And finally, the bottom left is disengagement. These are the skills you're not particularly good at and you really don't want to be. These things actually drain you. Now let's take a real example. The Director of Operations job we discussed earlier. Maybe you're a project-focused person who also loves dealing with people. If so, you might list the following skills in your high skill, high motivation quadrant. For example, project management, group facilitation, schedule management, cross-functional team building, executive advising, and coaching and mentoring. By contrast, if you don't particularly like dealing with numbers and data, you might list these skills in your high skill, low motivation quadrant: financial management, data analysis, risk management, technology strategy, and report writing. Again, these are the skills you're perfectly competent at, but don't particularly get excited about doing. And then in the professional development area, maybe because you really like group facilitation, you'd like to learn more about training. It's kind of in your want to category. But maybe you feel that you should know more about budget management. And finally, since rules and reporting don't thrill you, in your disengagement quadrant, you might list HR compliance. Now, how do you repurpose these skills into an actual business idea? Well, there is one more step. You'll need to look more closely at the upper right quadrant, the high skill, high motivation. Consider whether any of these skills are the ones that you love doing so much that you could possibly do them full-time in your own business. In other words, skills that really kind of pop out of the page where you say, I just can't get enough of this kind of work, and I could see myself doing it full-time on my own. It's what we call separating your ing from your Wait, what? What's that? Hang tight. I know it sounds a little funny, but it'll make sense in a minute. Your ing skill is something that you love doing. Let's say writing. Your is the small business that could come from writing, i.e. being a writer. In other words, it's the difference between doing versus being a doer. Next, you'll want to layer that with one more concept: identifying your tribe. That's the industry, mission, or sector whose business problems you know particularly well. Your tribe may be nonprofits, commercial real estate, manufacturing, or the government. And of course, there are villages, for example, environmental nonprofits or the military. Whichever tribe you've served in the past is the sector where you are likely well known, where you have the most confidence, and where your clients will likely come from. So now let's put it all together. Let's look at the ing skills that you enjoy doing, any where you feel like you'd like to repurpose those skills into a business, any tribes or hobbies where you feel confident, and finally, how you can monetize them. For example, let's say that your ing skill is project management. Your would be project manager. Let's say your tribe is government contracting, So you might explore being an outsourced project manager for government contractors. Let's say your ing is accounting and budgeting. Well, your could be a bookkeeper. And let's say that you regularly do volunteer work with elderly populations, so maybe you could provide bookkeeping services for nursing homes. Now, while you might think that that type of business is pretty niche, actually, the more niche your product or service, the more of an expert your customer will perceive you to be. Finally, it's time to do some deep thinking. So your next step is to consider some high engagement ing skills that you could repurpose into self-employment. Again, these could be professional skills or they could be hobbies. For example, have event planning skills? Maybe you might become a digital event planner. Have accounting skills? Maybe you want to be a small business accountant. Love to garden? Well, maybe you could be a landscape consultant for homeowners. And then secondly, consider whether you have a tribe, an industry or a sector where you have existing contacts and credibility. You can actually lean on this community to do your market research, test your ideas, and potentially land your first clients. Next steps? Well, if you're watching this video in a live BoomerWorks session, your facilitator will provide instruction for breakout room discussions. When you're in those rooms, first take a few minutes to complete the high skill, high motivation quadrant of the Passiontivity exercise. Then in your small group, discuss your ing, your and any tribe so that you can determine what might be monetizable. If you're watching this privately, spend some time doing the exercise we just discussed with a friend, preferably somebody objective, who can give you some honest feedback in your brainstorming. Then check out our next video, Your Guide to Self-Employment.